Fire me anytime. Extra long. Not safe for work. This story was categorized as malicious compliance, but I felt it was more like nuclear or even supernova revenge. Here's a way I used malicious compliance to get paid for doing nothing for the next year, while dedicating my efforts to the success of the competitors of the people who are paying me. This one is exceptionally long, but I hope you consider it worth your time. The setting: office of a small plumbing company offering residential and commercial services, 6 days per week, plus emergency service after hours and Sundays. 3 employees that handle dispatching technicians, invoicing, scheduling, parts ordering, etc. We all have the same skill set and cover each other's backs. Technically, we've all been hired as dispatchers. Take note. Administrative stuff like payroll, accounts receivable, accounts payable, marketing are all done at the head office, which has another 2 locations just like ours. The cast: original poster, 30s guy, single, no kids, very flexible schedule. Smashly, late 20s, single mom, raising 3 brats between 5 and 10 years old, constantly leaving early and missing days due to motherhood duties, doctor's appointments, school meetings, etc. Howard, older than dirt. I think he helped Noah build the Ark. Has even more elderly parents with dementia and has an arrangement with his sister. He lives with his parents on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and works Monday to Thursday, not available on the weekend under any circumstances. His sister lives with the parents Monday to Thursday. Oh, that kind of arrangement. Howard doesn't need the job, but if he leaves, then his sister will offload some of those days onto his plate, and he's having none of that. SOB, you'll meet him later. So the way this worked was Howard would come in at 6 a.m. and work until 2:30 p.m. Monday to Thursday. Smashly would come in and work 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday to Friday after getting her kids off to school and leaving early to pick them up. She would cover the weekends remotely from home. She also came in at 6 a.m. on Fridays since Howard wasn't in. I would come in at 11 a.m., work to 7:30 p.m. Monday to Friday, and cover on-call emergencies after hours. My hours were altered from the 8 to 4:30 in my contract by verbal mutual agreement. I didn't mind, as I like to sleep in. All went fabulously for a couple of years, until Smashly effed it all up. One of her duties was vetting and submitting timesheets for payroll, and head office noticed that one of the techs was consistently making more than the others. It turned out that Smashly was doing some horizontal dancing with one of the plumbers, and was inflating his hours on the payroll. It all came to light when a customer called for a warranty issue on some work that was done, and we could find no records in our system. The customer insisted that our tech was out, and the lady on the phone told them there was a 20% discount for cash. Emails were sent to head office, GPS records of the truck were examined, and the little scheme was discovered. She was puffing his hours, and they were making money on cash side jobs on the weekend. Both were fired for cause, and Smashly was stuck trying to raise 3 kids with no job, no unemployment. So now it's just me and Howard. HR and owner called us into a meeting and explained that Smashly was no longer employed. We worked out a temporary arrangement for scheduling until a 3rd person could be added to the team. Howard would work his usual Monday to Thursdays, staying until 4 p.m. on Monday and Tuesday. He would pre-dispatch any late calls, which we would try to avoid. The field supervisor for the plumbers would take after-hours calls directly on Monday and Tuesday. I would work Wednesday to Sunday and come in at 8 a.m. on Friday and work until my regular close time. I would pre-dispatch the plumber's first calls on Thursday nights. I covered after-hours Wednesday to Sunday. We were assured this was a temporary arrangement until a replacement for Smashly could be found. She was let go last May. With only 2 people covering the office, neither Howard nor I could take any time off, as there was nobody to cover. September 1st, enter SOB. SOB was brought into the picture to handle administrative stuff, which, admittedly, had gotten a little loose when only Howard and I were covering. Things like missing POs and parts orders, missing packing slips, reports of revenues and expenses being incomplete, that sort of thing. We were far too busy just trying to keep things running shorthanded to deal with any of this stuff. Howard and I were also told that SOB would cover the dispatch board if required. He came into the shop claiming he'd been brought in to whip us into shape. I couldn't stand him from the beginning. Abrupt, aggressive, and with a vocabulary that used a lot of swear words. Just a whatever, just let him handle the outward-facing stuff. Dealing with vendors, ordering parts, fleet maintenance, all that crap. He also handled timesheets for payroll and reporting to head office. Fine, I'm good with that. And if I have to deal with his BS for a couple of hours, 3 days a week, fine. I only worked under the same roof as him Wednesday to Friday, from 11 AM until his departure around 5 PM. It was endurable. I had requested time off twice after he arrived, and had been denied both times. Worthy of note is that my contract specified 3 weeks holiday a year, and up until he had arrived, I had only taken 2 days off in the spring. Fast forward to late November. If anything, SOB had gotten worse. He was really getting under my skin, and I had just about had enough. I have a teensy issue with anger, and it was becoming more and more difficult to rein in my rage and not kick the shit out of him. Then came the straw that broke the camel's back. I looked at my pay stub and saw that I was short 5 hours. I get paid, not only for the hours I am scheduled, but also for the time I put in covering after-hours emergency calls. This routinely put me up around 46 to 48 hours a week, with overtime after 44 hours, so these 5 hours I was short were overtime hours. I went to SOB on Friday payday and asked for an explanation. He replied that he had been directed to bring overtime down, and if I check my email, I will see a directive that states that under no circumstances is anyone to work overtime in this office. This was clearly directed at me, and me only, as Howard only put in 36 hours a week and didn't cover on-call. So why am I short 5 hours this pay? I deducted 30 minutes each day for lunch. But I don't take a lunch, I just eat a sandwich at my desk. Doesn't matter, I can take 30 minutes off your pay each day as unpaid break time. It's the letter of the law. But I actually worked these hours. Are you serious? Are you deducting me for breaks I didn't take? It's the letter of the law. You don't like it? Take it up with the labor board. I don't have time for this shit. Get back to your effing desk and do your effing job. Alright, now it's on. Piss me off all you like. Be a all you like. But F with my money, you are going to pay. I will F you over hard. I have a good friend, Eric, that I've known since high school, who is an associate at one of the better law firms in town. I invited him out for a few beers and some wings on Sunday night, and asked him if his firm handled stuff like this. You know, it's amazing the amount of advice you can get for a few pieces of chicken and some beer. Monday, I drove across town to a store and bought one of these. The link is to a pen with a recorder inside of it. They are pretty easy to get. Just Google Spy Shop for your city or order one off Amazon. I fiddled around with it and figured out how to get it to work. On Wednesday, I showed up for work at my usual 11 AM start time, and the things in the office were business as usual until 4 PM on the dot. I took my sandwich, a Coke, and a paperback novel and sat in my car. It didn't take long. About 10 after 4, SOB comes storming into the parking lot and demands to know exactly what the F I'm doing. Taking my lunch break, I replied. The phones are ringing off the hook. Jeff needs to process a credit card payment and Mike is just about as clear as coal. I need you back in there, right now. Sorry, SOB, but if you're not paying me for my break time, then I'm not working through my break time. Either you handle it, or I'll take care of it in, checks countdown timer on cell phone, 17 minutes. And then I rolled the window back up. It was beautiful. SOB turned red and stomped back into the office. When I returned, he demanded to know what the hell I thought I was up to. I am entitled to a 30-minute unpaid break. You took that time off my timesheet, so now I am taking my break. I am entitled to it. It's the letter of the law. He sputtered but had no response, so I went back to my desk. 5 minutes later, I get an email instructing me to take my break before 2 PM, so I can be back at my desk before Howard leaves for the day. I replied to his email, blind carbon copying the owner of the company and HR. I replied that I was unable to do so because, as per labor law, I'm not entitled to a lunch break until 5 hours into my shift. Therefore, I would continue to be away from my desk for 30 minutes, beginning at 4 PM. I even snipped and pasted a paragraph from the labor board website to support my position. He came into my office and chewed me out at length. I wouldn't budge. I told him, it's the letter of the law. If you have a problem with it, take it up with the labor board. On Thursday, just after SOB left for the day, I composed and sent him an email, again, blind carbon copying in owner and HR. I explained that I had agreed to changing my hours on a temporary basis until a third person could be added to the office. I also agreed to continue to work them until the transition was complete. As SOB was now firmly in the groove, I now withdraw my consent to the change of hours as contractually specified, and beginning Monday, I would revert to the hours in my contract. Friday I show up at 11 AM, and SOB is waiting for me with a printout of the email. HR and owner have been calling me. What the F is this all about? Simple. When I was hired, my hours were in the contract, Monday to Friday, 8 AM to 4:30 PM. They were changed by verbal agreement. Well, I withdraw my consent and stand on the hours specified in my contract. F that. You work the same hours until I tell you differently. The hours of the service in the contract are the letter of the law, contract law. If you want to change the hours, we can always renegotiate the contract. You want to alter the hours? Fine, then I want to alter my rate of pay. There was a flurry of emails. He would send them to me, and I would copy HR and owner on my replies, since he wasn't copying them in at all. So I worked Sunday, as usual, then showed up Monday at 8 AM. Howard asked me what the hell was going on, because SOB was badmouthing me all over the place, to him and to the techs. One thing you should know is that a good dispatcher in the service industry is a rare thing. There are trucking dispatchers, taxi dispatchers, tow truck dispatchers, but finding one that knows how to balance plumbers and customers and solve problems is tough. I get along with all my plumbers, and they are asking me what's happening. I take the high road and basically reveal nothing. I get along with these guys quite well. Towards early afternoon, I send SOB an email explaining that there are some late calls. How late do you need me to work? He replies, until the calls are run. Perfect. So I end up working until 6:30. Same on Tuesday, but 7 PM. Wednesday too. Sent emails both days, and SOB told me to stay both days. He replied to me only, and I sent an OK email reply, copying the bosses in. By Thursday morning, I had racked up 39.5 hours, 38 were in office, and 1.5 hours taking after-hour calls. About 10 AM, I sent an email again, copying the bigwigs, and detailing my hours for the week, explaining that at 12:30 PM, I would have a total of 44 hours, and as per SOP's directive of such and such a date prohibiting overtime, I was left with no choice but to go home. Just before I hit send, I turned to Howard and said, you might want to make some popcorn. SOB comes storming in and demands to know WTF. Well, SOB, I'm only following your directive. You said no overtime, right? Well, as of 12:30, I will be on overtime. Unless you say different, then I have to go. So, it's either rescind the no overtime, or I head out. Your call. SOB is now effed. He's been told to dial back on overtime, and now he's going to have to pay me overtime for half of Thursday, all of Friday, and all of Saturday, or cover the dispatch board himself. Work the effing weekend, goddammit, you miserable F. You'll pay for this shit. Okay, I'll need that in writing, and I can't work on Sunday. You have to. Listen, you little shit. You don't tell me when I have to work. I tell you when you have to work. And you're working Sunday. Nope. Labor law says specifically that I get 1 day off in 7. I can show you. Since I worked last Sunday, and I'm working every other day this week, I get this coming Sunday off. It's the letter of the law. Howard can't work it. I can't work it, so I guess you have to. But my kid has a tournament on Sunday. Can't you bend the rules? Sorry, it's the letter of the law. SOB was a real treat to be around for Thursday and Friday, I assure you, and my little spy pen recorded every word out of his mouth. Monday I come in, I think this was the 26th of November, and the owner, and HR, and SOB are waiting for me. Owner and HR want to know what the hell is going on. They're getting reports that I'm being insubordinate and threatening to abandon my job. SOB wants to can me, and up until 2 weeks ago, I was a model employee. I explain everything and refer them to the emails that I copied them in on. They asked what started this whole mess, and I told them that SOB had said he was told to reduce overtime and took time off my check that I had actually worked. He demanded that I go back to work on my break and that I schedule my break 3 hours into my shift. I laid it all out. Owner gave SOB the stink eye and said, "I never told you to dial back on overtime." They asked me if I would be willing to go back to the hours I was working before. "We can discuss it, but since this would be a major change to my employment contract, we will need to renegotiate it, including my rate of pay." "Can you go back to those hours and then we'll schedule a meeting?" "No, thank you. If I revert to previous hours, then you have no reason to schedule a meeting. We do the meeting first, then once we have a deal, you get your hours changed." "Let us talk about it. We'll get back to you." "Okay, but you need to discuss this soon. I am taking the last 3 weeks of December as vacation time." SOB explodes with owner and HR right there. You're not taking any effing vacation time without my approval, and I'm not approving a goddamn effing minute of vacation for you." I turn to owner and HR. "By labor law, I am entitled to vacation time yearly. By contract law, I'm entitled to 3 weeks. So far, I've taken 2 days this year. I've requested vacation twice, and SOB denied it both times. I couldn't take it in between when you fired Smashly and hired SOB because there were only 2 of us in the office. I get 3 weeks a year, and we are coming up to the end of the year. Company policy is use it or lose them, so I am using them." HR says, "We'll pay you the accrued vacation time." I look at her and reply, "I don't agree to your offer. I'm entitled to the time. I want the time, not the money." She thinks for a minute and says, "We'll roll it over to the new year." "I don't agree to your offer. I'm entitled to the time this year, not next year." SOB pipes up, "But Howard already has 2 weeks booked off, and I'm taking my family to Florida. You can't take the time. There's nobody to run the shop." "What? You're going to Florida? So you expect me to run the entire show alone, work 7 days a week, and you send an email saying no overtime? Are you effing serious?" Back to owner and HR. "Look, I had to work a full year before I was entitled to vacation. All of the plumbers have to work a full year before they are entitled to a vacation. Labor law says you have to work a full year before you're entitled to a vacation. And he's telling me I'm not allowed to take my vacation because he's going to Florida and he's only been here for 3 months? Is that what I'm hearing here? You guys told me to hold off on vacation time until we got a 3rd person," points at SOB. "Well, there he is, right there, and I'm taking the vacation I'm entitled to. No payout, no rollover. If you want to renegotiate my contract, it can wait until the new year," and I stormed out of the office. I don't know what the rest of the meeting was like, but an hour later, SOB starts chewing me out again, saying how he's out thousands of dollars, and now he has to tell his kids they're going to Disney World. Calls me every name in the book. The next 2 weeks were hell. What a calling me names, telling me he won't rest until I'm out on my and telling me I'm the worst piece of crap he has ever worked with. So I took my vacation time, didn't do a damn thing, didn't travel, just kicked back and relaxed, and spent time with my parents over the holidays. I get back in January, and there's a new face sitting at my desk, and SOB's there with a shit-eating grin and my separation papers. HR put laid off rather than fired, so I had that going for me, which was nice. Now where I live, if someone calls a former employer for a reference, all the former employer is permitted to say is the time frame of the former employee worked there and whether or not he would be eligible for rehire. So a few days into January, SOB gets a phone call. "Hi, SOB. My name is Eric. We're looking at OP's resume here. He says you were his most recent employer. You're on speaker. What can you tell us about him?" SOB goes off like a stick of dynamite, calling me every name in the book, saying that I was a horrible worker, lying about missing time, telling all sorts of BS. I let him go on and on. "Hey, SOB, recognize my voice?" He stops his ranting. "Yeah, I know your voice." Ever hear of the law offices of Dewey, Screwham, Ober, and Howie? They're lawyers. And this call is being placed from their conference room. Nice talking to you, SOB. The next call we're making is to owner and getting his lawyer's name. It took a while, but a meeting got scheduled with owner, HR, SOB, owner's lawyer, me, and Eric. Eric explained that I was starting a claim for wrongful dismissal, and this meeting was to explore the possibility of a settlement. We laid out everything, every email, a timeline of events, and then the pièce de la résistance, a supercut of the audio of SOB yelling, threatening, ranting, and just being SOB. It was beautiful. SOB went white. Owners stared at him the whole time like he wanted to erase him from the face of the earth. They asked us to excuse them for a few minutes, so Eric and I went for a coffee and chuckled. They texted us within 20 minutes to return. Owner's lawyer explained that they were admitting to no liability or wrongdoing, but that as a gesture of goodwill, they were willing to offer me 3 months of severance if I would sign a waiver. Eric smiled, declined, and then played the tape from the conference room about the reference. He also mentioned that he was present at the time, so were 2 of his colleagues, and they were all willing to file affidavits to that effect. Another break. We came back, and they upped the offer to 6 months. We countered with 2 years severance. Eventually, we settled on 15 months, with me to collect a check every 2 weeks, as if I was employed, based on the average of my hours for the past 6 months of my employment. And I racked up a lot of overtime in those 6 months. They even tried to stick a clause prohibiting me from working for anyone in the same industry while the deal was in effect, but Eric spotted it and had it struck out. My skill set is in demand, and it didn't take long for me to find another job doing the same thing, but for one of their competitors. It's awesome. These guys pay me on one Friday, and my working job pays me on the next. I'm racking up savings like you wouldn't believe, and Eric was pretty gentle with his billing. SOB, he was canned in no time, and between me and my owner's network of contacts, the rumor mill has basically made him untouchable. He's still looking for a job, as far as I know. I did tell my new employer to shit-can his resume if they ever got one. But if I ever get a phone call asking me for a reference for SOB, all I can tell them is that I worked for him for 4 months in 2018. I can't say more than that. It's the letter of the law. That was a story. SOB tries to use the law to screw this guy over and get snooked. For me, that was definitely worth reading. I hope you guys enjoyed the video too. And if you know any stories about anyone who tried to use the law or a rule or a technicality to screw someone over, but it backfired immensely, share it in the comment section. My friend's ex-wife gets his family's business shut down and burns their lives to the ground. Not what you may think. Sorry for the somewhat misleading title, but I couldn't resist. This story isn't about me, but 2 people I'm friends with. We'll call one Ray and one Justin. I'm posting this with Justin's permission, and he'll probably be reading the thread. Some background. Ray and Justin grew up in an extremely restrictive, insular, religious community that borders on being a cult. They both read a lot from a young age, even though reading outside of the religion's material was discouraged. And both of them grew increasingly skeptical and dissatisfied with their environment, due to having this peek into the outside world. In high school, this shared mindset brought them together, and they started secretly dating. For context, dating was absolutely strictly verboten in the religious community. You went straight from single to married, with 0 in between. So when Justin and Ray's parents caught them dating, they forced them to get married. To be clear, it wasn't like they were having sex. They basically were driving around together and holding hands in the downtown square where all the other kids hung out. Very tame, sheltered kid stuff. Ray and Justin started living together as husband and wife, but unfortunately for their families, putting those 2 together doubled their resiliency, and together they cooked up the plan to get out. They set up a secret bank account at a bank outside the religious community's influence, since their families had access to their accounts, and everyone who worked at the main bank was also in the same community and gossiped about everyone's financial transactions. They started squirreling away money in small amounts the families wouldn't question being missing from their paychecks. When they were 20, they finally had enough money to start over, and they got out. They basically left their house in the dead of night with nothing but what they could fit in their car and uprooted to live across the country. Pretty quickly after they moved, they decided to get amicably divorced since they never wanted to be married anyway. They still lived together for a while and basically became something between platonic roommates and each other's only family. Over time, they started dating other people. Some partners were scared off by the weird relationship between them, but most got it and understood that Justin and Ray had basically bonded through mutual trauma. I also met both of them during this time, and we became close friends. This whole time, both of their families and other members of their community were relentlessly harassing them. People were showing up at their house at all hours, and they had reason to believe people were trying to steal their identity over the years, though they'd fortunately both put a freeze on their credit, so nothing ever came of it. Then Justin had a bad accident, a really bad accident. He was on his bike, and a car blew through a stop sign without slowing down, and plowed right into him. He had to be rushed to the hospital, and landed in the ICU. Ray was his emergency contact, and I was with her and some other friends when she got the call. I immediately drove her to the hospital with a couple of other people, and she was melting down, understandably. The hospital staff wouldn't let us all in when we got there, but they let Ray in. She came out periodically to let us know what was going on. Justin wasn't unconscious, but he was totally out of it and didn't seem to know she was there, probably from the painkillers, but she was convinced he had permanent, debilitating brain damage, and basically the group of us were just soothing her and reassuring her it would be fine. A friend of ours who worked at the hospital as an MRI tech was also stopping by when she could on her breaks and calming down Ray. We'd been there all night and part of the day at this point, and the medical staff was giving us reason to be hopeful. But things got worse. To this day, no one knows how they found out, but 14 hours after Justin's accident, his parents, uncles, and grandfather showed up. They immediately had all of us removed from the ICU, Ray included. Unfortunately, as his ex-wife, she was no longer his legal next of kin and had no rights against his blood family. At this point, she was absolutely hysterical and inconsolable. She was convinced Justin's family would hurt him. I'm ashamed to say that the three of us that were there with her thought she was overreacting. We all knew Ray and Justin had left a effed up situation, but it wasn't like his own family would do anything to impede his recovery. She was getting angry with us for trying to calm her down and tried to explain that according to their religion, she and Justin deserved punishment from God, and only the greatest suffering could prompt repenting and redemption. She said their families embraced this thinking and wanted them to suffer, because it would prove that they did the wrong thing by leaving, and suffering would drive them back to the fold. She said as long as Justin was with his family, he wouldn't be safe. Our friend who worked for the hospital came and found Ray at that point. She made Ray swear up and down she wouldn't tell anyone she told her this, because she could get in deep trouble for releasing privileged information to someone unauthorized. But she'd caught wind that Justin's parents were aggressively demanding the hospital release him into their care, and that they were involving lawyers. The hospital was currently refusing because Justin wasn't stable enough to leave, but our friend warned Ray, as soon as Justin got to be stable, or the lawyers scared the hospital enough, it's possible the parents would be able to take Justin. This shocked the rest of us. Realizing his parents were not only willing to remove Justin from the hospital that had saved his life in the condition he was still in, but were actively trying to do it, made us really get, for the first time, why Ray was going out of her head with fear. At this point, Ray snapped into do-or-die mode. Convinced that Justin was about to literally die if she didn't act, she decided she would do everything in her power to start a fire at the home so that Justin's family would want to run back to put it out. And this wasn't too hard, because she had kept a lot of dirt on the whole community she came from. Like a madwoman, she started blowing the whistle all over Justin's family. She called the IRS's fraud hotline and detailed all the ways the family business was committing tax fraud. She submitted an ATF tip about how the same family business was illegally selling firearms without a license and without following any of the proper protocols, and was knowingly selling guns to convicted felons. She also reported Justin's mom's unlicensed daycare business, which was apparently extremely shady, including having over 30 children packed into one house, with Justin's mom as the only adult, and many of the childcare duties being farmed out to Justin's 12 and 14-year-old sisters. She called CPS on Justin's uncles and his parents for keeping their children out of school, and for physical abuse in one uncle's case. In all of these reports, she provided extensive details. She finished her calls and emails, and then she waited. We all waited for several hours, and nothing happened. Then, miraculously, Justin became lucid enough to understand what was going on and make his own decisions, and he kicked his family out again. From there began a slow but steady path to recovery. In all the relief and excitement to see Justin on the mend, we'd almost forgotten about Ray's campaign of desperation until a couple weeks later, when the screaming voice wails started pouring in to both of them. First, the business was being investigated by the IRS. Then it was being investigated for illegal firearms dealing. Then the daycare was getting investigated. At first, Ray felt a little guilty, but then she was like, you know what? No regrets. They would have killed Justin. From what they've been able to piece together in the year and a half since this happened, the business has gone under, and the daycare is shuttered. The uncle is 6 months into a new 5-year prison sentence for firearms possession. CPS investigated, which scared the shit out of the family, but nothing really came of it, which is especially sad in the case of the cousins being physically abused. That said, the parents are now too scared to keep the kids home from school, and with the unlicensed daycare shut down, the mom's not exploiting her daughter's labor anyway, so she has no incentive to keep them home. So Justin's little siblings are at least getting their education. Justin and Ray are both happy and thriving. Justin, unfortunately, will never recover from the accident. He has some permanent neurological damage that results in tremors, but he's pumped to be alive. He can work a full-time job, he can still be pretty physically active, and as far as I'm convinced, he wins. TLDR, kooky abusive family tries to remove my friend from critical medical care because reasons, and his ex-wife hits the panic button that burns their lives to the ground. Whenever multiple people are doing absurd things, you can bet some kind of cult is involved. My lawyer and I laid a trap for my adulterous alcoholic wife in my divorce. When I got divorced, my alcoholic wife of 18 years had started another affair, this time with her addictions counselor. My lawyer and I laid a trap for them. Just in case you don't know, intimate relations between a counselor and the patient are very frowned upon by the regulatory bodies, and I was more than pissed after putting her through rehab, $25,000, which I didn't have to do, only to have her fall back onto her old behavior. Shortly before the divorce was finalized, I filed a complaint with the state body licensing health professions. Knowing they were in some peril because of their unprofessional relationship, I had already gotten him fired from a major teaching hospital. She backed off her exorbitant demands. I paid her a very modest settlement, kept the house, got custody of the 3 tweenage kids, plus got child support. Her lawyer naturally included a clause in the divorce where I had to agree to not say anything negative about her lover and their relationship. But the lawyer effed up and never asked if I had already filed charges, and thus didn't require me to rescind them. Her lawyer had assured I was just bad-mouthing them to neighbors and friends, and it never occurred to the lawyer that we were doing much more. When the Board of Health Professions responded to my complaint shortly after the divorce was finalized, I told them it would take a subpoena for me to testify. A subpoena trumps an agreement in a divorce settlement. They were happy to oblige. They stripped his license and placed him on a register of sanctioned health professionals. He never worked again. They were broke in a handful of years, and she divorced him when the money ran out. In the interim, his mother had died, leaving a fair-sized estate, so it took longer than I expected. Oh, and the frosting on the cake was that his wife and I traded notes, notably hotel receipts from the time of their affair, that helped each of us in our respective divorces. Justice was served. 1 in 20 years, paying the bitch back. Buckle up, it's gonna be a long ride to the end, but oh so satisfying. Posted to Pro Revenge, and users recommended I share it here too. Some time back, I was hired to a company by a CEO I had previously worked for someplace else. He was a good friend, so when his newest company wasn't achieving sales, he headhunted me to join the new one. The company hadn't made a sale in 2 years. Year 1, the software product was in beta, so it wasn't ready to be sold. Year 2, they realized using the tech staff to make high-end sales to C-level executives was the shittiest sales model one could conceptualize. In general, and there are exceptions of course, these two personality styles don't speak the same language. Tech people talk tech, buyers talk benefits and how the potential product fills needs. I bridged the gap well by translating tech speak into natural conversational language so buyers understand how their needs will be filled. The job was an 1.5-hour drive one way from my home, so the CEO said I could work from home as long as I kept the sales management tool current. It's where you keep the notes of each product's status, came to important meetings, and made sure the executive team had daily sales reports. The first month I made the daily 3-hour commute because I needed to have solid, constant interaction with all the departments to rapidly form my sales strategy and develop a 2-way confidence level with the section heads. Once I had a handle on things, I was ready to launch my sales plan. In the meantime, the CEO hired a VP of sales, bitch boss, who started 4 days before I hit the ground running to get in front of buyers. She was a VP coming from the banking industry and had a long career in sales and marketing in finance products. I hated her from the moment she arrived. She knew F all about tech, and I spent huge time trying to orient her, which wasn't ideal because I needed to work on my sales strategy. They brought her on board because she had strong experience gaining financial investors. Nevertheless, I forged ahead, traveled to a target state and spent 19 days crisscrossing it. When I came back, I had 17 contracts from buyers, totaling about $2 million in sales. My CEO was overjoyed. Fast forward 6 months and now working from home. I'm rocking and rolling. Sales are strong, CEO is happy, good things are happening. Bitch Boss has landed an investor willing to drop $6 million into the company, and they are coming into town for a discovery meeting. She asks me to drive up because they specifically want to meet the salesperson. Seconds before walking in the door for the big meeting, Bitch Boss pulls me aside and says she needs me to back her up on the lie she has told him. Basically, she doubled my sales numbers. I told her there was no way I was going to do that. She says the CEO has okayed the lie. We get to the part in the talk where the investor is looking over my inflated sales numbers on the prospectus, then directly asked me how many sales I'm making in a month. Bitch Boss is behind him waving her arms, but I was having none of it and answered truthfully. He looked askance, staring at the document which has the false numbers listed, while she's giving me the stink eye behind him. No one says a word. Dead silence. I asked to see the document, and fates have aligned, allowing me to solve the dilemma. I explained the first two numbers were transposed. They correlated well to my real sales versus inflated sales if you flip-flop the first two digits. Potential investor is satisfied, and we move on. Switch gears. About a week later, I was meeting with the CIO in his office, and he referred to my big tits. I'm no shrinking violet, but it stunned me because it was so unexpected. That night, I was chatting with my BFF, who happens to be a lawyer, and told him about it in casual conversation. He said I should tell the CEO so he can address it. Thinking along smart business practices, I decided to tell Bitch Boss, to whom I directly report as proper protocol, since we don't have an HR department yet. Side note, I also reported directly to CIO as a boss, since my role was a muddy mix of sales and tech. The next day, CEO calls me, and I take him through it, telling him it's no big deal, but to make sure he talked to CIO so it didn't happen again. He said he'll do it right away. 2 days later, I check in with him, and CEO still hasn't talked to CIO because the investors were in town. I gently push him to get it done, and casually mention my best friend, who happens to be a lawyer, was the one who urged me to tell him, because any good CEO would want to know about it. I reiterate, I'm not mad or upset. The only word he heard was lawyer. He went apeshit that I was bringing a lawyer into the mix. Now, this guy was my good friend. We worked together at 2 companies for years. I calmed him down, or so I thought, explaining that I only wanted him to talk to CIO. I also told him I hadn't brought a lawyer into it, that I had been innocently chatting with BFF, who just happens to be a criminal defense attorney. He seemed okay, and we hung up. The next day, I'm working as usual when I get a call from an attorney who explains the company has hired her regarding my sexual harassment claim. I'm flummoxed and adamantly told her that was not the case, that I had no claim against the company. She said otherwise, and that's when everything changed, dramatically. CEO was furious with me for bringing this on when investors were looking at us. His reaction set the tone, which filtered down. The company began to retaliate against me. Bitch Boss now made it her mission to make my life hell, forgetting to tell me about the important meetings I was supposed to attend, freezing me out when I was in the office, telling me I could no longer even speak to CIO, a problem since I'm selling a multi-million-dollar tech product needing his input, and I directly reported to him as my other boss, denying me a long-planned, approved vacation, basically anything she could devise to screw me over. She was gleefully working it. Coinciding with this was a serious health problem I developed, ultimately requiring surgery. My illness had no impact on my work, as I was able to work from home, which made things easier on me health-wise. Bitch Boss then decided I need to come into the office every day, despite a 3-hour round commute. Now I know you're thinking, why didn't I just leave, get another job somewhere else? I needed the health insurance. There was no way to turn around another job fast enough, and I had a complex surgery scheduled requiring 3 surgeons for my procedure. My doctor gave me a note for them, which released me from having to make the daily commute, so I could continue to work at home. As long as my work didn't suffer, they illegally couldn't force me to commute, especially since working from home was a part of my employment contract from the outset. The night before my surgery, Bitch Boss calls to tell me they've cancelled my health insurance. After hanging up with Bitch Boss, I collapsed on the floor in a faint. I was so sick and mentally exhausted from all the stress. The next morning, the CEO frantically calls asking to talk to me. My mom refuses to let him. I'm on official leave as of that morning, and we're heading to the hospital. CEO had told their lawyer about canceling my health insurance, and she chewed him a new a-hole, telling him it was illegal. They immediately reinstated my insurance. In the 2 weeks I was out, my mom had found a lawyer for me, as it was clear shenanigans were going on. I still needed them as an employer, because I was in no shape to rigorously job hunt while recovering. Turns out, All the bullshit they were doing to me is illegal. Companies aren't allowed to retaliate against employees when they report nefarious acts against them. I met with my new lawyer, who said I had an excellent claim for retaliation and took me on. He said I had to continue working there when he did his thing to stay within protocol, while he filed the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's claim. Now it's time for me to return to work. The company had relocated, planned, during my absence, and bitch boss refused to tell me where, so I couldn't come back to work. Company lawyer told them they had to tell me, so bitch boss gives me the wrong directions, making me late on day one. I walk in the new office, and it looks like any other place, except for one thing. There is a wide open area directly in front of the CEO's glass office, with a single desk in the middle of it. Welcome to my new desk. Also, I wasn't allowed to do sales anymore. In fact, I wasn't allowed to do anything. At all. Period. They hired a bunch of new people to the company, and they treated me like a pariah. Turns out bitch boss had gone to telling them a pack of lies, and if they know what's good for them, they'll stay away. Since I had nothing to do, but couldn't just sit there looking like a dope, I worked on documenting everything being done to me, per my lawyer's advice. I was meticulous in my note-taking. Bitch boss began writing me up. Stupid stuff like not answering my phone on the first ring, and for asking questions during company-wide meetings, asking to see my personnel file, which employees are legally entitled to do, although not entitled to photocopy any of it. Each time she wrote me up, I had to sign the write-up. There was a space for me to reply to it, so I consistently wrote, "I do not agree with this assessment." It infuriated her so much, she wrote me up again for writing the statement that I didn't agree with it. There were several instances where she called me into her office and literally began screaming at me loudly and enthusiastically. I wouldn't engage though. My standard answer to everything was, "Okay," which made her apoplectic. At one point, she's inches from my face screaming. Her face beet red, and I just sat there with a dreamy expression whilst envisioning her blowing a vein in her head stroking out. I infuriated her with my equanimity. Still in all, I was in it to win it at this point. It didn't matter what new humiliation they dished out. I took it all with a bland face, then went to my desk and documented it in my notebook. She loathed my notebook, sure that I was doing exactly what I was doing, documenting. Because it was my personal property though, she couldn't take it from me. I had to carry all my belongings with me everywhere. Company-wide meetings, the bathroom, lunch, because I caught her one time going through my desk drawer in my effing purse. Although it gave me great joy to write a note reading F you, which I left in my backpack and jerry-rigging it so I could tell if she went into it, which she did. I withstood it all with a brave face, only breaking down once I left for the day. My attorney took a lot of sobbing phone calls during this period. Finally, the day comes that my attorney has what he needs, and I can resign. Better still, he advises me I don't have to give a 2-week notice. I come back from lunch and type up my letter with one sentence. I resign immediately. I take it to the HR guy, who also took part in their evil machinations, and hand it to him. His mouth forms an O shape, and he half stands up from his chair as he reads it. He looks up, and I give him a smile and say, "Bye-bye, just as sweet as pie." Walked out the door and drove home feeling mighty fine. 1 month later, my lawyer and I are at the EEOC office, along with the CEO, bitch boss, and their lawyer, so the EEOC can review my claim. In my state, you can't just bring a lawsuit against a company for things like harassment and retaliation. Claims must first be evaluated by the EEOC, and then if they determine you have enough grounds to file a lawsuit, they issue a right to sue document. My lawyer presented my case logically and forthright, detailing all the evidence. It took him 40 minutes to go through it all. Then they presented their side, with allegations of my poor employment, along with their evidence, which were all the copious write-ups bitch boss had written. EEOC asked about the timeline of the write-ups, inquiring if they were before or after my claim occurred. Bitch boss, wearing a smug, self-satisfied smile, states they were all prior to my claim, as noted by the dates on each document. EEOC lady looks at my lawyer looks at me, I look at bitch boss, and then serenely pull out my photocopies of the documents. Whilst handing them to EEOC lady, bitch boss barks, "She's not supposed to have those! They're company property!" I show EEOC lady that the dates had clearly been altered by bitch boss. She had made copies with dates blanked out, then backdated them. You see, whenever she wrote me up, I had to take the document personally to the CEO to put in my personnel file. Along the way though, I stopped at the copier and took copies. She never knew I was doing this. You could have heard a pin drop. EEOC lady reviews the copies, then slowly sets them on the table. She didn't say a thing for a long time. Then she spoke. I can remember her words exactly to this day. I have seen a lot of ill treatment and illegal undertakings by both employees and employers, including forged or altered documents. But I have never seen someone so incredibly stupid to present documents this easily disproved. Not only are employees entitled to receive and keep a copy of formal write-ups, but reading these ridiculous allegations, it's obvious you're trying to manipulate your case. She went on to say I had a clear case for a lawsuit, and moreover, I would win it. She recommended their side go in another room and determine a settlement amount to pay me immediately or risk the lawsuit. They went to a nearby office, and I could hear the lawyer dressing them down. Words I heard included, lied to me, lied to EEOC, presenting false documents, broke so many laws, figure out a number big enough to pay her so this doesn't go to court because you will lose. They came back with a $50,000 offer, which we accepted. My lawyer and I left, then did a football touchdown dance in the parking lot. Looking up at the EEOC window, I could see Bitch Boss in the window looking miserable and crying. She had just been fired. That was my year 1 revenge. I'm not a hateful person. I get mad and get over it. But for Bitch Boss, I nurtured hatred and vowed to one day get revenge. So I kept tabs on her and discovered she opened a finance marketing company after she was fired. Then I waited a year before exacting my petty delight. For the past 18 years, I've executed a wonderful, soul-refreshing project. Each year, I go to her website and write down all the work email addresses and phone numbers for the employees. Then I subscribe them all to get more information from places like online schools, online insurance companies, all those BS aggressive organizations that keep your contact information longer than a gypsy effing curse while trying to sell you stuff. The last few years, I've subscribed them to an email bomb service, where the service takes the address and instantly subscribes it to thousands of newsletters, requests for more information feeds, and other online buyers of email addresses for marketing services. I tested it with a burner email, and it wreaks havoc on your inbox, with thousands of emails received within seconds, and they never effing stop. You literally have to close down the email because it can't be salvaged. Each year, when I go to collect the contact information, all the emails have been changed to new ones. Last year, my cousin took a job in the same building. I enlisted her help, and she made it a point to befriend a receptionist working for Bitch Boss. After executing my yearly plan, my cousin went to lunch with her. The receptionist was in a foul mood and explained the entire organization was in disarray because IT had to redo all the emails again. It keeps happening over and over, and nobody can figure out why. She said the owner, Bitch Boss, has had to get her cell phone number replaced 3 times because of all the texts and phone calls she gets whenever it happens again. Sometimes, Bitch Boss would have her phone number on the website, which I duly subscribed to everything under the sun. The best part for me was hearing how she lost a mega client because they felt the company was in too much turmoil so often. The thought of this keeps me warm and cozy at night, and I sleep so very, very well. You try to cut my team in half, so I outsourced your entire department. This tale takes place over the course of many months and resulted in over 150 layoffs, all to save 22 IT techs from losing their jobs. I learned a long time ago that no one cares about the IT team at our company. They see us as those useless employees always complaining about rules. We are a mortgage company, and those rules are the rules everyone follows to protect customer data privacy and to prevent theft. When your company suddenly loses 2 full payments for a house to some scammer in Nigeria, and the FTC has questions for you, then it's time to change your policies. This meant cutting legacy access, revoking unnecessary access, and correctly coding job titles in the Active Directory to prevent people from granting their own access. What this boiled down to was a meeting that I phoned into a year ago. This was one of those meetings where I did not need to be there, budget meetings. In this meeting, the VP over the accounting department played a recording showing times when someone in the IT tech team provided subpar service. She tried using this as a reason to fire half of the tech team. The trouble was, all of the people she played recordings of were already fired for giving terrible customer service. These people were replaced by 5-star techs who know what they're doing and give excellent customer service. This started the whole chain of events that led to last week. Since this meeting was every 2 months, VP has tried to use her position and influence to grow her team while shrinking ours. Every budget meeting, I would show up and VP, who shall henceforth be referred to as Karen, would target my team. I would pull out the numbers and pull out the logs, showing how my team received a little over 3/4 of that team's call volume. I show how my team of 22 techs personally received more phone calls than every other inbound call employee by more than double the number. I show how with the call volume we receive, we still maintain a 98% satisfaction rating. At the third budget meeting, the COO had been tired of hearing the same excuses and wanted hard data. He had a point. I was merely throwing out basic numbers without providing real data. Our company was in the middle of a budget crisis, and someone needed to be cut. These budget meetings were basically a way to defend our department from the chopping block. Karen believed that the best defense was a good offense. She was right, but not in the way she thought. When it became clear that the IT support team was on the chopping block, Karen starts to have her employees call into the tech center and have them make requests that she knows we cannot assist with, as that is handled by another company entirely. We're not able to transfer calls to an external line, so the only thing we can do is give the numbers a call and hang up. The negative customer satisfaction started to flood in after this. Every single call from that team regarding a vendor's password reset gets a negative customer satisfaction report. Our approval rating tanked to 72% in 1 day. I instantly took action. First, I contact a few of the users on recorded calls and ask them why they call the IT tech team when they know we're not capable of resetting the vendor's password. She replied that she was told it was policy to do that now. I asked why they left a negative satisfaction rating, and she said that those no longer count against the employee. Those are only used for macro metrics. I walked over to Karen's office and walked in. Karen, why are you having your team call mine to reset vendor's password? Karen looked confused and stated that she did no such thing. She said she would talk to her team and make sure they called the correct number in the future. The calls did not stop. Now a few of her team were calling in with personal machines that were not an asset of our company. They were wanting things done which would violate license agreements with Microsoft or Dell. Each of these were refused, and each of these were leaving negative customer satisfaction reports. It became clear that Karen was trying to tank our stats before the next budget meeting. I let my boss know, and he just gives me a sly smile. The leash is off. Sick her. This is an inside joke between us, as I'm someone who is very detail-oriented when I'm focused. When you try to get my team fired because you want to grow your useless team, I'm very focused on you now. The first thing I do is enable call recording for every corporate employee as to not arouse her suspicions. Her team did not have call recording enabled because her team handles CDP on a daily basis. I think that means continuous data protection. If anyone knows for sure, leave a quick comment. I pull a live call and listen in. This is employee with our company. May I have your account number or your name? The customer gives the name. Okay, I have your account pulled up. Are you wanting to make a payment? Customer says yes. Are you authorizing me to go ahead and make the withdrawal from the bank account we have on file? Customer agrees. Okay, payment is processing. You will be notified in X days when it's complete. Your next due date is this date. Customer thanks her and he hangs up. Entire phone call was 1 minute and 22 seconds. Short phone call, so I listened to another. Similar situation. I listen to another and get the same thing. I start seeing a pattern here, so I go through the rapidly building log and see that all the phone calls are usually less than 1 minute and 20 seconds long. It takes well over an hour before an anomaly occurs, and I see a 5-minute phone call. The customer needed an extension, and the employee was authorized to give her a 30-day extension to avoid a late fee if she would make a double payment next month. The person on the phone agreed. At this point, I also turn on customer satisfaction for her team only. I expected a largely similar rating as my team. I was not prepared for the nearly 50% rating that steadily dropped. My boss comes over to my desk as he's getting the email notifications for the sub 75% customer satisfaction rating and was flabbergasted at the sheer volume of negative reports. It's now clear there is no choice but to examine this further. I assigned 4 people to review the negative calls from the other team and have them all. The amount of employees being downright rude to customers, not other employees, but paying customers over the phone, was shocking. The negative tones in their voice, the unwillingness to fully answer questions, the extreme lack of empathy, and the shocking lack of mute button use was too much. Then came another shocker. The number of customer-facing employees was ridiculous. 152 employees to handle roughly 30% more calls than my team of 22. I called the CIO. CIO, what you got for me? Me. I have something for you. It's incredibly evil, depressingly accurate, and can probably save the company a ridiculous amount of money. You know this is the second time you have said those exact words to me, right? Yup, but there's something I need to know first. I'm not currently authorized to know it, and I need to request it in a way that would not set off any red flags. What is it? The starting pay scale for all account employees. Tell me your plan. The next budget meeting was not a budget meeting. It was an IT tech defend yourself meeting. The COO directed it and let Karen speak first. Karen pulled out the same stuff as before, calls upon calls to our group that were cherry-picked, as well as listing off dead zone times when we had people working but no one calling in. Then went on about how they could cut our group in half and hire more account employees to reduce the workflow. Instead of defending myself or my department, I played 4 of the short call recordings from Karen's department. I then pulled up the Excel sheets that was color-coded showing how many phone calls each account rep received, and the length of time they were on each call, and the customer satisfaction rating. I explained the lack of high customer satisfaction with my own little recording I like to call a fail-tage. It's a montage of fail, and her team were the stars. Before you ask, I did put music to it. Damn, I wonder what kind of music he put. The recording starts off with an employee saying, "Yeah, I guess I can take your payment," then goes straight into one where a customer accidentally gave the wrong bank account info and said don't use that one. The rep responded with a, "Christ, what is the actual account number?" It only got worse from there. The group was unmanaged for so long that they were filled with rude and useless employees. I then showed them a side-by-side comparison of each tech who received a call. I showed how my techs were receiving more than 4 times the number of calls per rep than her team was getting per day. I showed how we all were on the phone for well over 7 times the amount of time her team was on the phone for, and I demonstrated how each tech had double or triple the satisfaction rating over all of her group. Half the room that was uninterested in the conversation were suddenly interested when I closed out my presentation. In short, I saw no reason to defend the IT team today, as I have successfully done so in every prior meeting. Since the last meeting, however, Karen has crossed the line and has had her team call mine in regards to things we have no access to. I played the recording of me calling her minion. As you can see here, she directed her team to call mine and to leave bad satisfaction ratings on my guys because of it. I have since deleted those customer satisfaction ratings as they served no purpose whatsoever. I then pulled out my next flowchart. This is the monthly expense taken from the last 9 meetings that our company spends on IT and servicing departments. I look at the COO, who was looking at me intently. Before today, I was on the defensive as I saw no reason to attack another group, but it is clear to me now that my team has a target on its back. That is why I now show you this. It was a graph showing the starting pay scale for each IT and servicing employee code, as well as their average daily workflow. There was one glaring anomaly on this list. Account department had the highest starting pay scale with the least amount of work. So basically, in layman's terms, the account department can be reduced to 1/10 of its current size, and we can reduce the pay scale to a little over 1/2, as this department requires very little in the way of problem solving and critical thinking. I saw a few raised eyebrows, as well as one impressed smile from the CIO. The COO ushers everyone out of the room, except for me, my direct supervisor, and the CIO. He looked at me and said, "Continue." Further, we can cut this department entirely and outsource them instead of IT. Since this group merely takes payments and sometimes allows extensions, we do not have to worry too much about technical ability. Outside of simply using Windows, we can hire high schoolers if we wanted to. This got a laugh from the CIO. Karen was staring through the window with this smug grin on her face the entire time. Now for my final bit for this meeting. I'm going to play 2 cherry-picked phone calls. These are the 2 most technical phone calls I could find from the last month for both departments. I played a call where a payment fails to process and the rep realizes she typed in the wrong number. Then I play a call where it starts out with a user stating that her customer submitted a payment to the wrong CD. The tech breaks out into our procedure to prevent wire fraud. Thanks to the quick action of this tech, we were able to reverse the CD and save the customer from losing their down payment. I believe CD means certificate of deposit. If I'm mistaken, someone correct me in the comments. The final masterful stroke was playing my final card. As you all know, Karen has been coming after my team for months. She's been grinding her axe against us because she, like everyone else, has made the mistake that we are incompetent, inept, and useless to the company. What she did not know was that I have all of the logs showing the truth. The smoke she's been blowing for years is so thick that it's ridiculous. Her team is highly replaceable, and we both know my team would require extensive training and effort to replace. The CIO spoke up. With just about 30 people, we can outsource her entire department and save the company millions a year. The next time we have a major IT issue, you will be regretting outsourcing us. He then pointed to the graphs and flowcharts brought by both myself and Karen. Her team is useless. The next day, I watched in pure joy as a term request came in for Karen. It came in with a double asterisk indicator at the beginning, meaning this was a stealth term, to be done and coordinated with the person who will inform her of the termination. It's not actually a double asterisk. I changed that for here to protect identities. Over the next 2 months, the account team was shuttered. First, they came for anyone with disciplinary issues or attendance issues. Then, they laid off anyone who had been there a really long time. Then, the newest employees. The smart ones applied for other positions in the company or left before getting laid off. All the while, the calls for payments were slowly shunted to the call center in India. By the end of last week, we only have 4 domestic accounts people who take escalations that the India call center is not authorized to take. Do I feel guilty about being integral for 148 people being laid off? Yes, quite. But I know it was necessary to keep my job and my health insurance. Without my health insurance, I'm a dead man. The entire reason this happened though was because the division was slated to be cut and sent to India from the outset. Thanks to the actions of myself and my direct supervisor, we prevented it from being a sure thing that our team was going to get cut. On top of that, we cut out a festering wound in the company that was slowing it down and costing it money. My team has not been brought up in the budgetary meetings since. Now that, folks, is pro-revenge done right. Just goes to show, before you go after someone, make sure your own house is in order. And of course, if someone is coming after you, check to see if they're doing something wrong. So what do you think? Do you think he did the right thing? If so, why? If not, why not? Share your thoughts in the comments.